Okay, so first of all, apologies for the delay with this video. As you've no doubt seen, there's a few cases that have popped up that I've just really felt compelled to talk about. This morning I was putting out another video on missing Phoebe Bishop, the 17-year-old who's missing from Queensland, and another sad bit of news from the same area where Phoebe's actually gone missing from, which is a little bit disturbing, is a little 3-year-old called Sophia Flanagan, who was on Monday night. You can read the screen because if I say it this early on in the video, YouTube won't like that. So, 2 cases from Queensland, Australia that I've been talking about. So I've just finished the second video talking about little Sophia. So now I really need to get on and start talking about Tyler Wallace. So if you've missed my other recent videos on the Maddie case, I've done a deep dive into the interview that was done with Maddie's former stepfather, Stephen Young, which was interesting. If you've not watched the series that I just did on him, it's a 4-part revisit of his interview. I recommend you do, because there's some things that come out that give us some more insight into what was going on with Jen. Although at the same time, I did come away from the interview somewhat undecided as to what my thoughts really were about this man, where his allegiances lied. Was he standing up for Jen, or was he torn between wanting to cough up the goods on Jen and wanting to not let down Yolanda and Juan, who, as he said, did a lot for him in the past. I must admit, with the number of videos that I've been working on in the last couple of days, I haven't had a chance yet to read people's comments on Stephen Young, and I'm looking forward to reading them and hoping that you guys have maybe given me a bit more insight and helped me to figure it out, because yeah, by the end of it, I had a theory, but whether my theory is correct, who knows. If you haven't listened to it, definitely do. There's a few things there that are quite significant, I think. So moving on, we have Tyler Wallace, Maddie's bio dad, who wasn't exactly a huge part of her life. It's actually so long since I listened to his interview that I think it's going to be quite interesting to re-listen to it and really try and figure out what's going on here. So with that said, let's jump straight in.
The date is March 11, 2024. The time is 2:02 p.m. It's a reference case number 24001896. Person present are myself, Detective Morris, Detective Smallwood, and we're going to be calling Tyler Wallace, who is the biological father of Madeline Soto.
Hello?
Hi, is this Tatiana and Tyler?
Yes.
Okay. Once again, appreciate you taking my call this afternoon. So as you're well aware, I got myself and my partner here, Detective Smallwood. We are working the case in reference to Madeline.
Yes.
All right. So I know, Tatiana, you're not biologically involved, but Tyler is. So I'm going to ask a majority of my questions. I need him to answer instead of you. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Tyler, can you spell your first and last name for me?
Yes, sir. My first name is Tyler, Tyler.
Okay.
My last name is Wallace, Wallace.
Okay. So once again, first of all, I want to express our condolences to you.
Thank you, sir.
I know it's a difficult time for you and everybody else that's involved. So some of these questions may be difficult for you to answer, but I want you to do the best you can, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, Tyler, you are Madeline's biological father. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I am her biological father.
Okay. When were you and Jennifer together?
Are you asking our physical time or like relationship time?
Yeah, relationship time.
We dated when I was 16. I believe we were together for roughly 3 years. And then we ended up having an encounter in 2009 from which Maddie was born.
Okay.
We were not together at the time. I was with my wife. We were engaged. Well, we weren't engaged yet, but it was around that time.
Got it. Okay. Were you in Florida here, or where were you guys at?
I was at the time of our dating, so when I was 16 years of age and such, we would have been in Florida around Orlando and Kissimmee.
Okay.
I was living with my parents at the time. She was living with hers. At the time of our second encounter in 2009, I would have been stationed, I believe, in Baltimore, Maryland, doing training, and then in Kings Bay, Georgia Naval Base is where I was stationed for my duty station, and I encountered her there.
Okay. Did she live up there or just come to visit? How did that come about?
She was visiting. Our initial encounter in 2009, she was living in New York with her father at the time. I had just gone through boot camp, and we had connected, I believe, on MySpace. And then she ended up visiting me and a group of my Marines around November, and I only know it was that time because it was around the Marine Corps ball, so I have something to tie it to. I'm actually pretty wishy-washy with time, but that was around the period our encounter would have occurred.
Got it.
I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Can you reframe or if I answered that, let me know what.
No, yeah, you're good.
Okay, I'm just going to point out how awkward it must have felt for him discussing the time when he was cheating on his wife, essentially, even though they weren't married at that point in time. But they were in a relationship, and here he is in front of her talking about having an encounter with Jen. I think he's not being entirely truthful here, and I suspect that it is because it's in front of his wife. So he's saying that they were together for 3 years from when he was about 16. Then he's claiming that they had this encounter in 2019, just after he'd finished boot camp when he was actually stationed at his Navy base. But the problem with that is that he's saying that the encounter occurred in November of 2009. Well, either Jen is an elephant or he's got his dates really, really wrong. Because Maddie was born in February of 2011. So unless she had a 13-month gestation period, then something just isn't adding up here. And he's saying here that they connected on MySpace. Look, he's lucky that Tatiana even married him in the end. I mean, this guy was in a serious relationship that was moving to the point of becoming engaged, and he connected with an ex-girlfriend on MySpace, and then she came to visit him. Wow. Tatiana must be some kind of saint. Because honestly, if I was in a serious relationship with a guy, and his ex-girlfriend decided to rock up for a visit, and they connected, or what was it? They had an encounter. Ridiculous terms that he's using here too, by the way. I mean, that would be it for me. I'd be like, yeah, pack your bags, sod off. I mean, I know he's basically using these terms to downplay it, to depersonalize it, to make it sound like there was nothing emotional about it. It was just an encounter, and they just kind of connected. But, it didn't mean anything. I wonder what Maddie would have thought had she been told that basically she was the result of an encounter between her parents.
So you guys weren't actually dating at the time she was conceived, is that correct?
Yes, sir, correct.
Okay. How much involvement have you had in Maddie's life?
I have tried to maintain civil connections with the mother. I would say prior to the last 2 years, I normally got to see my daughter about once a year. But I was involved in a legal case in which I had to go to prison for 2 months due to some stuff that occurred in the Marine Corps in 2009. The short version of the story there is that I had some friends, in air quotes, who stole ammunition from the government, and then when an investigation came out from that, I was contacted by NCIS. I rendezvoused with them. I provided information, and then due to the nature of the case, I was required to spend 2 months in prison in the Federal Detention Center in Houston, Texas. And I just never financially recovered from that. So it's like it was 2 years since I got to see Maddie, and the last time I saw her was October of last year.
Honestly, none of these people know how to give a straight answer. So, oh my gosh. I just had to go back and actually re-listen to what the actual question was, because by the time I'd listened to all that word salad, I'd actually forgotten what he'd been asked. So the question was, how much involvement did you have in Maddie's life? And he starts coming up with his justification for essentially being an absent father. He knows that once a year, and also then for 2 years not seeing her at all, is really not great in terms of being a father, so he comes up with these excuses. Now, what the heck is this story he's saying with regards to the legal case? Now, I'll come back to that. But he's coming up with all these excuses. First of all, he's saying that he tried to maintain civil connections with the mother. So he can't even refer to Jen by her name, and I don't blame him. I mean, at this point in time, he probably knows her well enough for him to actually feel that she is at least partly responsible for what happened to Maddie. But then he also only refers to Maddie as my daughter. Now, I don't know if that's just to emphasise the fact that basically he wasn't getting to see her as much. Maybe there is some bitterness there that maybe Jen wasn't making it quite so easy for him to be a father. But look, honestly, if you are a father and you actually give a damn about your kid, then you're going to find ways to make sure that you are involved in their life. And to be quite frank, when you start making excuses like his, that just shows that you realise you were a pretty pathetic parent and really did not have enough involvement in your child's life. I mean, let's be realistic here. Maddie was having holidays more than once a year. You could have organised to fly her to spend time with you during her holidays more than once a year. Claiming that your finances never recovered from 2009, well, that is a pretty poor excuse. He's talking about a 15-year period. He's basically been married for at least 13 years, or roughly 13 years, meaning that they've been, I would presume, on a double income. They don't have children of their own. So why not put some money towards your daughter? Have some actual parental responsibility. Because you know what? Now you can't. The opportunity is gone. So let's talk about this legal case that he's talking about. Some of his friends stole ammunition, and then he was contacted by NCIS as part of the investigation. And because of that, he provided info, and because of that, he was required to spend 2 months in prison. Why would you be spending 2 months in prison just for providing information? The only reason you would spend that time in prison would be if you were actually involved. So it is that classic story of, it wasn't me, I was just with the people who did it. This guy clearly can't take responsibility for his own actions, and I find that somewhat alarming. And now, seriously, 2 months in prison and you're saying that's just ruined you financially for the last 15 years. I just don't buy that. I think if you were truly motivated, then you would do something about that, and you would make sure that you were in a position financially to get by. But here's the thing, here's something that I've always lived by, and it is so true. If you want something badly enough, you will make it happen. If you can't make it happen, then you clearly didn't want it that badly. So he clearly wasn't concerned about spending much time with Maddie. Otherwise, he would have just been like, well, to heck with Jen, for starters. She has no right to stop me from having any contact with my daughter or from having access to my daughter. And then, even if your finances were tight, you would find a way to put money aside. If it really was important to you to spend time with your daughter, you would find a way to make it happen. I mean, can we just accept the fact here that he's originally from Florida. He has family in Florida. So I don't know if the decision to move to Texas is because that's where his wife's family is. But when you've got a child, that should come into the mix when you are deciding where you want to live. And I just struggle with this idea of fathers who are happy to live miles away from their child if they're not willing to then make the effort to make their child feel like they do actually care about them, and to actually make sure that that child gets as much time with them as possible. I mean, if you are going to move to another state away from your child because of employment, as far as I'm concerned, that employment better be something that pays you well enough for you to be able to fly your child there at least 2-3 times a year, if not more. But I honestly just find it confusing that a parent would want to live that far away from their child. It really feels like nobody cared enough about Maddie to actually commit to her full time. Now, maybe I'm being harsh on Tyler here, but it sounds like he is trying his damnedest to make excuses for being an absent parent.
And where were you then? Did you come to Florida, or?
She came to Texas.
Maddie was sent to visit us in Texas. She traveled unattended. I received her at the airport.
Now, I know he does touch on this later on in the interview, but he speaks like somebody who is on the autism spectrum. The word that I think of to describe it is wooden. There's not a lot of inflection. It's quite a flat speech. And also his choice of words is kind of unusual. So I am thinking that he could well be on the spectrum. He is speaking about Maddie here like she's a parcel. He received her at the airport. He didn't meet her at the airport. She was sent to visit us in Texas. Not she came to visit us. Or we brought her here to visit us. She travelled unattended. Has she travelled alone? They're just very sent, unattended, received. They're just really, really odd words to be using in this context. It really does make it sound like she was a parcel or a pet dog, not a, at the time, 12-year-old girl. There just seems to be a lack of emotion, or I don't know, something about it is just odd. Maybe this is just part of the grief that he's going through, and I'd imagine that he does have so much anger and hatred towards Jen that perhaps anything that he's saying in relation to Jen is going to come out in this kind of wooden way, because he's trying to sound at least a little bit nice. I don't know. I have to see how this goes. But right now, I just find it's very, very interesting the way he is talking.
Okay. How would you describe the relationship between you and Jennifer right now?
I'm not contacting Jennifer, and I desire to receive updates outside of the family. All the information I have regarding my daughter has been passed to me through her family, and I just...
Again, we have the unusual speech patterns there. I desire to receive updates outside of the family. That's not spoken English, that's written English. That's what I would expect to see in an email, if someone is writing a formal email or in a formal letter. It's not so much verbal language. Now, maybe he is saying it that way because a letter has been sent or contact has been sent, and in his mind it's still fresh. But it's definitely an unusual way of phrasing what he is saying. I don't blame him for not having contact with Jen. I certainly wouldn't want to have contact with her either if I was in his position. I find it interesting that he says that he wants these updates outside of the family. He's only getting information that's been passed through her family. That to me says that he doesn't trust her family, and that he feels that he's perhaps not being given the full story, which is interesting because this is the first time we've heard anyone express anything with regards to the family. He again refers to Maddie as his daughter rather than Maddie, And I think definitely the emphasis here is to show his entitlement to being told what's going on, to not hearing things secondhand, and to be, only getting part of the story. I think him referring to Maddie as my daughter is him basically saying he's frustrated because he feels like he's not being kept in the loop, and he feels like he should be treated as Maddie's father, not as some outsider who lives off in another state. I can certainly appreciate this, but I also just want to point out that, this guy chose not to really be much of a part in Maddie's life. So it's a little bit like you kind of reap what you sow. And that's a bit harsh to say, given that his daughter's just died. But, if you're not going to be there for your daughter while she's alive, then to suddenly emphasise that she's your daughter and expect the rights of a full-time parent, it's a bit much. That said, look, given the situation, I can understand him not really understanding those finer points and not really seeing the other side of things. And, at the end of the day, she was still his daughter, even if he was a somewhat absent father. So he certainly has some rights. But I just feel that he's kind of waited 13 years too late to start asserting those rights.
But I get that. But what was your guys' relationship leading up to all of this?
I tried to talk with Jennifer as little as possible. There was a period when Maddie was first born that Jennifer seemed pretty intent on breaking up my marriage with my wife. And so, in the nature of making everybody happy, I just talked to Jennifer as little as possible, which is why I had so little contact with Maddie growing up. I only just recently started reaching out to Maddie through, like, Skype and stuff, where she was able to, or not Skype, excuse me, what did we use? I think we used, like, Instagram or FaceTime, but we would use like video chats and voice chat to start talking. And so I was starting to get a deeper relationship with Maddie, and then this occurred.
Was there anybody in Maddie's life who ever considered putting her needs above their own? I mean, essentially what he's saying here is that him and Jen didn't get along. I can understand the issue in terms of him believing that Jen was trying to break him and Tatiana up after Maddie was born. And, I can understand you wanting to create some distance for the sake of your marriage. But, if you're going into a marriage and you have a child, even if you don't have custody of that child, and your spouse isn't prepared to make allowances to allow you to be a parent, then you might want to question your life choices. Because at the end of the day, kids only get one each of their biological parents. So he's saying, to make everybody happy, I talk to Jen as little as possible, which is the reason for having so little contact with Maddie. Well, then it didn't make everyone happy, did it? Bunch of grown-ass adults who were too precious to actually consider the emotional well-being of a child. It shouldn't have mattered that him and Jen didn't get along. It shouldn't have mattered if Tatiana didn't like Jen or felt that Jen was a threat to the marriage somehow. The three of them needed to work it out for the sake of Maddie. Maddie was his daughter, and yet he couldn't put his big boy pants on and actually act like a grown-up and act like a parent. Instead, Maddie's the one that had to suffer because he couldn't stand Jen. And this may be an unpopular opinion, but him choosing to be the absent parent, choosing not to be overly involved in Maddie's life, choosing not to be a father, that means he is also partly responsible for what happened to Maddie. You have a child who, for a few years, had a father with Stephen Young. Stephen cleared off, moved to another state. Her bio, Dad didn't have any interest in her. That's how she would have seen it. So to have another adult basically offering her the chance to have a father, she was too young to understand that what he was asking from her was not actually what a father would ask of a child. All she saw was a man who wanted to show her what she probably saw as unconditional love. He had her right where he wanted her. Stefan did. This was a child who didn't have a father. No matter how you look at it, Tyler did not step up and be a father for Maddie. He left an opening there, and Stefan stepped in. Had he still been in the picture, had he had a close enough relationship with Maddie, she wouldn't have been craving another father figure, or a father figure for that matter. And I'm not saying that it's wrong for women to raise children as a single parent and to not connect with that child's father. But, you know, to not connect with the child's biological father and then bring another male into the whole scenario who is a predator. I mean, both Maddie's parents, as far as I'm concerned, are responsible. You know, the people making choices here. Tyler had a choice to be a father for Maddie. But because he didn't want to talk to Jen, didn't want to have anything to do with Jen, then that cost Maddie. She didn't get to have him in her life as a father. He was just this random stranger that she got to see once a year. Jen had a choice. If she wasn't prepared to try and work out some kind of mature relationship with Tyler and Tatiana, which would allow Maddie to have a father, then she should have damn well found a way to make sure that if she was going to bring another male into Maddie's life, that he was going to be someone who would actually act as a father, not someone that was going to take advantage in the way Stefan did. Neither of these two did right by Maddie. And I understand what he's saying here in terms of that, you know, more recently he had started reaching out to Maddie through social media, essentially. What he's saying is that Maddie was old enough to forget about the middleman. He could reach out to Maddie without having to go through Jen. So it was still on his terms. He couldn't be bothered being a parent when Maddie wasn't old enough to have these independent communications, because he didn't want to communicate with Jen. Didn't matter to him the effect that had on Maddie. And then he just seems to think that, well, Maddie was old enough now to communicate without Jen as the intermediary, so now I might step in and become a father. Well, sorry, Tyler. Too late. Too little, too late. You missed out. Feel free to roast me in the comments for being too harsh. But to me, all I'm hearing is excuses from him in terms of why he didn't make the effort to be a father to Maddie. And I should point out, this is a sensitive topic. This is something that people experience differently in life. People have different opinions on. And I really hope I am not stomping on anyone else's beliefs, because I really don't want to do that. And I hope that if anyone feels that I am being unduly harsh, that they feel safe enough to express themselves in the comments section and express their own opinion of this, and that the people who are reading it will also respect that and understand, the personal side of what we are talking about here.
Okay. So you say you contacted her through social media. What do you list yourself on different social media accounts? What is your screen names?
My screen names?
Yeah.
Usually my screen names will all be a variation of my email. I can give you my email, but it's going to be CPTHRDCR. So most of my screen names are like a variation of that with a 13 behind it. But I have on Facebook it just says my normal name. I believe Instagram I come up as CPTHRDCR13. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm bad at managing all of my social media accounts. I'm locked out of half of them right now.
Okay.
Honestly, I can sympathise with him there. If it wasn't for the fact that my phone kept all my passwords safe for me, I wouldn't be able to get into anything. I must confess I've got a Dropbox account that is full of old photos from when my nieces and nephews were really little. And because that was pre-saved passwords kind of time, I keep getting emails saying, you need to go in and make sure that you're still active, or, something like that. But I can't get into it. The email that I need for the actual sign-in is no longer connected to the account, or no longer exists. So, it's like guesswork of, well, how do I get in? So I understand exactly what he's talking about.
All right. So you said you and Jennifer, you haven't had that cordial relationship. But you started with...
I would say our relationship has been cordial, but it is a surface-level cordialness maintained on our side to guarantee access with Maddie, because I was never able to afford to go to court to get my custodial rights established with her.
So all I'm hearing here is excuses. And one question I have here is, okay, so he's saying that he kept this surface level relationship with Jen, even though he's a minute ago said, well, I had as little contact with Jen as possible because, couldn't stand her, basically, and that his relationship with Maddie suffered because of that. Well, now he's saying, well, I kept this surface level relationship to guarantee access to Maddie. that once a year access to Maddie. And my question is this. Where do his parents fit into this? You know, they had a grandchild. They had a grandchild who lived in the same state as them, unless they left and moved away from Florida. So there wasn't any support for Tyler from his parents to help him gain access to Maddie. Because, you know, most parents would do anything in their power to have access to a grandchild. But it seems like we never hear anything about his parents ever being involved in Maddie's life at all. And now he's saying, well, you know, he was never able to go to court to establish custodial rights. Again, what I said before, you know, if you really cared about it, you'd fight for it. You know, why was he never able to go to court? Because he couldn't afford to? You know, there must be advocates out there that can help parents to be able to go to court and represent themselves. And yes, I just listened back through that. That is all three dogs having a snore fest right now. But yeah, going back to representing themselves in court. American courts have this system where you can apply to make a case in forma pauperis, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but basically where you can actually file a case, a civil case, and you can fill out a form that basically says that you can't afford the legal fees. And the court will look at that and approve that if that is correct. So there is no excuse. It just seems like, you know, he's just got one excuse after the next. And I think if he had really, really wanted to get custodial rights, you know, to be able to have Maddie go and visit him twice a year or something, then he would have pulled his thumb out and done it. You know, I get that people struggle with things like depression, anxiety, all these sort of things that make it really hard to do simple, everyday things. But at the same time, you know, if you've got a child thrown into the mix there, and you genuinely do want to be a part of that child's life, then I just feel that all he's done is make excuses here. And I think he does talk about his mental health later on. But, you know, did he care enough about Maddie to want to actually try and make an effort to have her in his life? Because it really doesn't sound like it. It sounds like he decided that being a father was just way too hard. Just put it in the too hard basket. I worried about just, you know, living my life, and maybe down the track Maddie will forgive me for not wanting to be a father, and I'll just be able to saunter back into her life and everything will be good. You know, it doesn't work that way. You know, you need to be a father from day one.
Okay. And you said you started reaching back out to Maddie last year on a more consistent basis?
Yes, sir. She was coming up on the age of 13, and so the last time I had stayed, when she had visited us in October, I was basically talking to her about how she would feel about coming to live with us in Texas, that was something she would be interested in, and she expressed that she would be interested, but she didn't say why or what. We just kind of left it at that, and it was something I was going to talk to Jennifer about, but just hadn't yet.
Okay.
So, apparently he's had this conversation with Maddie about her going to live with him. Nearly 6 months before Maddie died. But he hadn't had a chance to talk to Jen about it. Really? 6 months you hadn't had a chance to talk to Jen about it. Again, it's all excuses, it's all promises. He probably got caught up in that whole... Caught in the moment. Just enjoying having Maddie around. Made promises that he couldn't keep. And then he didn't follow through. I wonder how that made Maddie feel. And was he doing that because Maddie was saying that her and Jen weren't getting along? Or was it for his own needs? Because we know that things were really bad between, well, they appear to have been not so great, between Jen and Maddie. But was this just him suddenly thinking, oh, well, you know, she's easier to handle now that she's a teenager. I don't have to worry about changing nappies or any of those additional responsibilities that come with having a young child. She's nearly done. Maybe I'll be a parent now. I don't know what his motivation was, but it seems to me that he can't have been overly serious about it if nearly 6 months down the track he still hadn't spoken to Jen about the idea. It seems like he got caught up in the moment of just having Maddie around and for a moment there got caught up in the fantasy of being a father. And then after Maddie went home, having made a promise that he couldn't keep, he just forgot about it. Out of sight, out of mind. And I wonder how that made Maddie feel. You know, she was living in this horrible world. And then someone offered to take her out of that horrible world and give her a home that was away from all that. Only to then not follow through. I wonder if he even wished Maddie her happy birthday. Or if he sent her a present. I mean, these days, you can buy something on Amazon and have it delivered directly. And you're not even paying the additional postage cost. Now, please tell me if I'm being unduly harsh here, because I know I am being quite harsh. And, you know, maybe I have my own biases here, and I'm being unfair. But, you know, so far, all I'm hearing is excuses from Tyler over why he couldn't step up and actually be a father for Maddie.
How was Madeline when she come to see you in October?
She seemed to be in very good spirits, but a thing I kept saying was that I don't know if this will make sense to you, but I can give you the context if you need it. She reminded me of a character from a show called Euphoria, in the sense that there was just an emotional weight about her that I did not understand what was the cause. It just seemed like she was dealing with stuff that a 12-year-old girl shouldn't deal with, but I didn't get to see her enough to really pry, and so I was just trying to ask her, like, surface-level comfort questions to build a relationship with her, but I had no clue anything was going on at that time.
I understand what he's saying there. I mean, we can all see it in Maddie's eyes. She wasn't a happy child, you know. The smile never went beyond the lips. The smile wasn't in the eyes. So, you know, yeah, I can understand what he's saying about her carrying an emotional weight and dealing with stuff that a 12-year-old girl shouldn't deal with. And this time around, I'm going to give him a pass, saying, he didn't get to see enough to really pry. We know that Maddie didn't confide in anyone. She didn't even confide in her best friend. So, she would have needed to be around Tyler for a really long time to be able to actually confide in him. And even then, she probably wouldn't have. I mean, when it's something like that, the biological parent, regardless of how close they are to the child, is probably going to be the last one to find out. I think my question here would have been, how often were you communicating with Maddie after she returned home from Texas? And did you discuss this with Jen? It's all very well to say that she had this emotional weight to her and, you didn't build a big enough relationship with her to be able to get to the bottom of it, and, you had no clue what was going on. But, did you do anything more? Did you talk to Jen about your concerns? Did you start speaking to Maddie a couple of times a week or something? I mean, even just contacting once a week isn't really enough if you really want to be a father. How much can you say once a week? You don't build a relationship from talking to someone once a week. Not a decent relationship, not a trusting relationship. And again, the question of where's his parents when all this is going on? Are they just not interested in having a grandchild? Because if they were in Florida, they could have been another source of support for Maddie. They could have been, these grandparents that Maddie could have gone and spent weekends with, who just maybe because they weren't related to Jen, if she built up a good enough relationship with them, maybe if she was crying to them and saying that she didn't want to go home, they might have been able to get to the bottom of the situation, rather than, like Yolanda, just go, well, sorry, you've got to go home. Or, well, we'll just give you a day with your grandfather and then send you home.
Got it. How long was she out there visiting you?
She was with us for 4 days in October.
You're kidding me, right? 4 days. I actually don't recall this part of the interview, because I would have been flabbergasted had I actually paid attention to that part of it before. 4 days. You can't build a relationship in 4 days. You flew her all the way over to Texas just to spend 4 days with you. What, because it interfered too much with your personal life? It interfered too much with your marriage to have your daughter there? That's so sad. 4 days. No wonder he didn't know anything about what was going on. You'd only just be starting to break the ice after 4 days, given that it had been 2 years since he had last seen her.
Okay. Have you talked to her since October?
I had a couple of Instagram communications with her since then. I talked to her, I believe, once or twice on video chat. and I can't remember the exact dates, but I have, just so you know, I have left all of my social media untouched since the search turned into a verification that she was in fact dead, just in case any of my social medias can be useful to you guys.
Since the search turned into a verification that she was in fact dead. How cold is that? Like I said at the start of this video, maybe he is on the spectrum and this is just the way he speaks. Because that's nearly as cold as Jen referring to the body. I feel so sad listening to him talking about how often he spoke to Maddie after she returned home from her visit in October. They talked a couple of times on Instagram and then at least once or twice on video chat. At least once or twice. So, once or twice, basically. Maybe once. I'm going to say, based on him saying at least once or twice, that it was probably once. So he's had barely any communication with her after she went to stay with him. You know, he's saying that she was carrying this emotional weight, but that, you know, he didn't have a close enough relationship to find out what was going on, to find out what, you know, what the problem was, where she needed help. But that didn't inspire him to then try and build a relationship after she returned home. You know, here I am going, well, you know, even once a week isn't really enough to build a good, strong relationship. Well, he didn't even manage that. He wasn't in contact with her on a regular basis. Someone made a comment in one of my videos a while back that I thought was so appropriate, and it still applies here. Maddie was the throwaway kid. Nobody was really bothered with actually putting her first in their world. She didn't have one single adult who put her needs above everything else. Not even one of her biological parents. And I mean, I think we can tell from the lack of communication after she returned home that he really wasn't the least bit serious about having her go live with him. Otherwise, he would have been working on building a relationship with her. And he clearly wasn't concerned over this emotional weight that he saw her carrying, because he still didn't try and maintain contact after she went home. Maddie was just like a fad for Tyler. Well, you know, let's play daddy for 4 days and then send her back where we got her from. And then we'll just, you know, forget about her until next time we decide we want to play daddy again.
Okay. At the end, I'm going to give you my email address. If you can just send me screenshots of your conversations with Maddie or any that you may have had with Jennifer.
Yes, let me write that down real quick. Screenshots of conversations with Maddie or Jennifer.
Yeah.
Is there anything in specific you're looking for?
Nope, all your conversations. That'd be great.
Say that one more time.
Just all of the conversations you've had with Maddie.
Yeah, got it.
And then if you've had some with Jennifer, those as well.
Roger.
Okay, so the conversation heads off in a different direction at this point in time, and the question is brought up basically, how did Tyler hear about Maddie being missing? So I think this is a good spot to stop for now. Also, this is the third video that I've worked on today, so I've basically put in a very, very long day on the mic, so I'm ready to wrap it up. Now, as I said, please don't hesitate to pull me up in the comments section if you think I'm being too harsh with Tyler, and if you feel that there is a different perspective that I should be considering. I love the way that several of my regular subscribers do on occasion offer up perspectives that I just hadn't taken into account. I mean, we all come from different backgrounds, we all have different life experiences, which means that we do see things quite differently at times. And I recognise that I am probably coming at this with a really strong bias. And I will admit that comes from a personal experience as a child. I won't go into details, but I realise that my perception of Tyler probably is a little bit coloured by my own experiences. So certainly I'm willing to hear other perspectives that I may not take into account. And like I said, it's a tricky thing when you are talking about parenting, because there's always a risk that you are going to offend someone without meaning to. So I do apologise if I have offended anyone with my opinions. It certainly wasn't intentional, and I am more than willing to be shown other perspectives. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button. Right now my channel really needs that to get my videos back out there into the algorithm. And please do leave a comment below. Thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.